All right, let's take a look at creating some geometry. It's going to be a little confusing at first on how to rotate, pan, move, and all this other good stuff. So we're going to start off with just creating a very simple cube. So I'm going to go up to the top, go to Create Polygon Primitive, and go to Cube. And you'll see one appears in our scene. Now if I hit the space bar, you can see clearly it is below this dark line. This is the grid that the grid that is sort of going across the center of our perspective view. So I'm going to move this cube up by selecting this over here, which is our move tool. You can also access that by pressing the W key. If I pull this up, notice I brought that above the grid, and I can actually go in my top view here and rotate, just sort of position this cube in the corner, so you can see that. Now it would be nice to sort of edit this so that it lines up against this little dark line. So that's what we want to do first, is sort of create these walls. The way to do that is by holding the right mouse button down. I can go down to face, and I can click on this face here, make sure my symmetry is off, and I can push this over to the side. Same thing here, I'm going to select this face here, just kind of push it off to the side. Now it appears that there's like different, maybe like a screen door here, and it's broken up in different sections, and that's okay, because what we're going to do is just duplicate this wall and place it in these different sections. So I'm going to hold the right mouse button down and go to object mode, and what that allows me to do is select this as a whole. Now notice that my pivot point got off center when I selected that face, and that's okay. If we go up to modify at the top here and we do center pivot, you'll notice that my pivot point is now centered. Now there's a couple ways of doing this. If I hold shift and I click on this arrow here, I can actually duplicate that without any trouble. Another useful tool is down here, there's the rotate and there's the scale. I'm going to click on this scale and just sort of thin this out so it goes something like this in the center. Now there's a couple things up here that tend to help me see better or differentiate my models from my plane. I'm going to hit spacebar to zoom in here for a second. And that's these guys up here. There is this default material. We don't have any materials, so we don't need that now. I like this wireframe on shaded. And what that does is notice it adds a wireframe on top of my model. That helps me to see it a little bit better. I also like some of these other tools like ambient occlusion, and that'll add like a little shadow to the bottom of my object as I move. There's a couple other nifty tools. There's these, this is for joins for X-ray mode, but we'll get into that stuff later. This also allows us to isolate just the object that we're working on, this button here. All right, so let's just get back into holding shift and sort of duplicating this out. Now I am exaggerating out the thickness of this. It is a lot thicker, so press R or select that. It's a lot thinner than that. But I like to kind of exaggerate it because in games you're sort of looking at things from this distance. Alright, let's hit W and then hold shift. I'm going to hit R and scale this out. So there's a couple of different ways of doing this. And I'm just slowly creating these different wall pieces. Just kind of learning how to rotate, how to move around my scene. As I mentioned before, if you want to get a little bit more fine or exact, I'm going to rotate so I'm looking at this face. Right click, select the face there. Alright, right click, go to object mode so I can select this whole thing again. Notice my pivot is off, so modify, center pivot. Anytime you move a face or whatever, you sort of have to do that. I'm going to hold shift, bring this out here, position this against the wall here. Now notice, I'm going to show you sort of a trick. Notice I didn't go all the way to the corner here. Well, what we can do is I can actually select this face, and using that same shift option, I can extrude out an extra set of faces. And now I can hold shift again, and I can create a nice corner piece. But remember, as I go to object mode, my pivot is slightly off center pivot. So now with this, if I hold shift, I might want to use this to cover this corner here. So there's a couple ways of doing this. If I go and I go to edit here and I go down to duplicate special, notice it gives me a bunch of these options. And one is this inverse of scale. So these represent the X, the Y, and the Z. So we have an X, Y, and Z here. So if I made my Z, for example, -1, and I wanted to make a copy and I hit apply, notice across the Z axis on the bottom, it made a copy for me. So that was kind of helpful. I'm going to right click, go to face mode, just kind of close this up here, select this face here, and move it over here. Oops. Go to object mode. Same thing here. I'm going to hold shift, just kind of move this, position this here, face mode, thin this guy out a little bit. Let's make sure we center the pivot on that. So just kind of practicing with these different tools until we construct the walls. Looks like there's two pieces there. Let's delete this guy out. Okay, I'm going to quickly position these guys like this. I'm going to go ahead and create this piece. Remember, we have like a little corner piece going on here. And I might actually select all of these side walls. Just thin them out a little bit like that. They're a little bit too thick. Do the same thing here. So holding shift, extrude this out. Holding shift, oops, extrude this out. And that pretty much finishes off, with the exception of these little guys here, the walls. So one last one here, and I'll steal this guy over here, sort of position him here. So yeah, that completes the outer walls of the house.